Now, I've been craving my Harmony Cobel fix since she drove off in episode 3, and Severance just served it up as easy as Hampton passed over a refill to the customer in the dripping pod. Honestly, I think this actually has the potential to be a divisive episode. It was more visual than vocal, and it was all about a sense of enlightenment and addressing two major things that were still haunting Harmony Cobel from her past in the present day. Plus, with that being at the core of the episode, it gave us arguably one of the biggest revelations at the end that threw Jame Eagan's integrity into question and provided fuel to the fire within Harmony Cobel's core about her newfound desire to bring Lumon to its knees. Something which was supported by the final song Firewoman, which played over her escaping what I'm imagining is Mr. Drummond driving towards Sissy's house. So with that, let's dive into the episode, break down the important details and discuss all things Severance Season 2 Episode 8. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Harmony Cobel's grief. This entire episode was set in the location that Harmony couldn't quite bring herself to go to during the beginning of episode 3, which was Salt's Neck. However, with the stunning backdrop of the ocean and the waves, with the blanket of snow as she was headed towards there, the ominous music that played over those visuals provided a haunting, melancholic backdrop to what we were about to see unfold within the shortest episode of the season. We knew that Harmony was mourning her mother and she'd never truly gotten over it, as she still had the breathing tube that Charlotte was breathing through when she drew her last breath. And we saw this grief being one of the two main pillars of the episode that contributed to Harmony not only becoming closer to her mother and being able to finally move on, but she also ultimately ended up mirroring the same mindset that her mother had throughout her life now that she'd turned her back on Lumon. Harmony visited Sissy and wanted to access her mother's room so that she could get the very thing that she was after. These were the blueprints and the designs that she'd single-handedly come up with herself for the Severance procedure. Every element of it, including the Glasgow block and the overtime protocol, something which showed that she was actually the brains behind the genius idea that had transformed the workforce and made the Eagan name what it was in the present day. However, Jame Eagan took all credit for it, as we know from when Helena told Mark that her father was the inventor of it, and he also went on to become CEO of the company. Harmony was holding on to the pain that she had from when her mother died, and the fact that she wasn't there for her in her dying moments because instead she was in the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls and being indoctrinated into believing Kier's ways. It was something that sat on her shoulders and she hadn't been able to forgive herself for, which is why we saw her react in the way that she did when she first entered the room and saw the very bed that her mother died on. Sissy said, "Your studies were more important," when Harmony said, "I didn't get to say goodbye." And because she was a valedictorian and somebody that the Eagans saw the ways of Kier in, the very prospect of leaving her studies to go and say goodbye to her mother, somebody that was a non-believer, was something that wasn't viewed as important. I'd say that with the way that we saw Harmony in Season 1 and Season 2, all the time that she was building towards this career that she'd worked to the bone for and made sacrifices for, that grief and resentment towards Lumon for taking her blueprints and giving her no credit wasn't at the forefront of her mind that much, because Lumon was pretty much her family and all that she'd come to know. However, since having turned her back on the company this season due to the way that they disregarded her and promoted Milchick, it probably made that regret and grief fizz to the top of her mind and want to address it. Finding out that Harmony's mother was a non-believer is something that I didn't truly expect in the slightest, but I wonder if she was a non-believer because of the way that Lumon noticed greatness in her daughter and then took her away from her. That and maybe the fact that Lumon was seen as the company that made the town prosper in a way that had darkness at its core and put children through labor like it was the Victorian times in having them working in dangerous ether factories, managing vats at as young as 8 years old. Something that I thought was a nice touch was the fact that in Charlotte's room there was a photo of a young Harmony Cobel on the shelf, something which showed that even in her dying moments she was thinking of her daughter and that she was proud of her despite the pathway that she ended up going down. Another moment in the episode that I thought showed Harmony's true change of side was when she was searching for the key to her mother's bedroom and she quite literally went to her desk and disregarded any item that she once would have valued due to its association to Kier and was left in the perfect position, such as her display which had all of the 9 core principles on and also the photo of Mr. Eagan. As I said, Charlotte was a non-believer, and it feels like with Harmony sleeping on her mother's bed and breathing in the breathing tube the same way that her mother did when she drew her last, it feels like it was symbolic of Harmony adopting that very mindset that her mother once had and her being past the point of no return. Harmony is no longer a believer in the Eagans, Kier's ways, and even Lumon. And with her answering the phone to Devon and speaking with Mark, I think she's going to set out to destroy the very thing that she created and bring Lumon, Jame, and Helena to their knees. Something else that supports that in my mind was the ice melting and turning into the crashing waves prior to her getting her hands on the blueprints. There's no slowing Harmony Cobel down now. I thought we were actually going to get a Mr. Milchick changing sides, but we've got one better and got Miss Cobel herself. Harmony Cobel and Miss Huang's connection. Buried deep within this episode was a moment which felt like it connected all the way back to the first episode of Season 2, and that was a moment that was centered around the connection between Miss Huang and Miss Cobel. During the first episode of the season, there was a scene where Milchick was looking at his computer screen as it kept repeating the words, "Hello, Miss Cobel," and then alongside that shot, it kept cutting between the screen and Miss Huang, insinuating that there could potentially be a connection of some kind between the both of them. Then within episode 6, we heard Mr. Milchick say that if Miss Huang were to graduate from the fellowship, then she'd need to be deemed Wintertide material. This is the very thing that we saw Harmony Cobel go through as she received the Wintertide Fellowship reward off of Jame himself when she looked through the yearbook that was in the outhouse. This feels like it answers a little bit more about Miss Huang's involvement at Lumon and what her responsibility is. This revelation most likely means that Miss Huang could be at Myrtle Eagan School for Girls, and she's been assigned this role on the 7th floor as part of the program to see if she's worthy of being Wintertide material, just as Miss Cobel was. We know that Harmony participated in some kind of apprenticeship too whilst she was studying, so I feel like this could be the case for Miss Huang. Harmony did her apprenticeship at the Ether Mill, but that clearly doesn't exist anymore, and the Lumon HQ has almost taken its place, so that could be why Miss Huang's there. Maybe Miss Huang is valedictorian, a strong academic, and has Kier within her as Harmony once did, and that could be why they've put her on a floor that's filled with turmoil, because they want to see how she handles it and if she can overcome the issues that are in front of her, almost putting her through the situations that Harmony had to deal with and be around, because she'd most likely be ascending the position if all went to plan. So I feel like it provided some clarity on Miss Huang for sure, or at least some more theories to just throw into the pile. The dark history of Lumon. Not only did we learn that Lumon in the present day when it came to the severance procedure was built off of the back of lies, but we also found out more about the dark past of what occurred in Salt's Neck. Harmony and Hampton were standing outside a factory on the edge of town, and Harmony mentioned how Kier and his wife met whilst working inside of an ether factory. So it makes me think that Harmony and Hampton were both standing outside of a factory that made ether, also known as diethyl ether, which is what Sweet Vitriol, the title of the episode, is named after. Harmony referred to Hampton as a colleague when she asked for help, and he responded by saying, "Colleague? Child labor," which we later found out was the case with the both of them, as when Harmony took the substance that Hampton had and was selling, she mentioned how she hadn't done it since she was 8 years old, and he responded by saying and making a joke, "Are you ready to man a vat for 10 hours? Meaning that when they were kids they were working in the mill and being taken advantage of. Salt's Neck was the prime example of a town that seemed to once have flourished with a certain industry being present and built up within it, and then once it upped and left, as we heard from Hampton with the market shifting, interest rates changing and retrenchment from some of the infrastructure investments, the town fell to pieces and lost what once potentially allowed it to thrive. Many of the residents seemed to be on the huff, as what Sissy referred to it as, and Harmony said, "You gave him the thirst for it," when Sissy mentioned how she didn't want Hampton near her house because he sold the stuff. I wonder if the ether that could have been getting produced in the mill that was in the town was the very thing that became the substance that could have destroyed it and was now plaguing the very few people that were left, as all of the people that we saw in the town seemed to be addicted to the substance. A line that I absolutely loved in this episode, which triggered Harmony into showing Sissy that the severance procedure was her design, was "Everything you have you owe to the Eagans as fealty." Harmony owed nothing to the Eagans. If anything, it's actually quite the opposite. The Eagans owe everything to Harmony, because without her, it feels like their company could well have fallen into obscurity, so it was a poignant line for sure. What this discovery means for Mark. During this episode, we saw that Devon called Harmony multiple times throughout it, and Harmony grew less and less reluctant to answer it the more time she called. This provided a good insight into the timing of when Harmony was in Salt's Neck and when the events were taking place. She was most likely there the evening of Mark going through his reintegration, passing out, and then the following day when he woke up could be when Harmony eventually answered the phone. What I loved about the ending of this episode was that Harmony had now changed sides completely, and Mark was genuinely in the most capable of hands when it came to not only looking to take down Lumon, but also to truly understand the Severance procedure, what other things could be done with it, such as the Glasgow block and the overtime protocol. But also, if Cobell has truly changed sides, she might well be able to reveal the answer to what the Cold Harbor project is and why they're so interested in Gemma. Devon told Harmony that Reg Harvey reintegrated Mark, and Harmony wanted Mark on the phone after hearing that so he could tell her everything. With a now fully reintegrated Mark, Harmony might be able to prevent future side effects from taking place due to her knowing the ins and outs of what to do, and this could ultimately give Mark the best hope of being able to get back onto the severed floor and search for the exports hallway and the testing floor. My review of the episode. I think this is an episode that's going to either be loved or it's going to be disliked. I say that because this is our second week not on the severed floor and without some of the main characters such as Dylan, Helly, Irving and Mr. Milchick. And with this being a shorter episode and one which felt like it didn't actually have that much dialogue within it, it was even more artistic and stylistic in its approach and delivery than that of episode 7, which personally I thought was the best episode in the season along with episode 4. But what I would say is that I feel like this was definitely a needed episode, and I did enjoy it for what it was because we finally got some clarity on Harmony Cobel's past, just how valued she was by Lumon Industries from a young age, and also the discoveries around the fact that the Eagan name and Lumon Industries would be nothing in the modern day without Harmony's contribution. So there were some real important revelations and moments that I think will mark a change in direction for the story and some of the characters, as Harmony Cobel is well equipped with the knowledge on the Severance procedure as it was born from her very mind. I actually loved the fact that Harmony was the person that was responsible for it all, because it showed that she was so indoctrinated by the teachings of Keir that she was willing to allow her own success to be looked over in order for somebody else to take credit for it. Because, as she said, she believed that Keir's knowledge was for all. But now, it's as if her epiphany that she had and the regrets that she held onto that Lumon were directly responsible for, such as taking her away from the age of 12, not letting her say goodbye to her mother whom she loved before she died, and also taking her blueprints for the Severance procedure were now right at the forefront of her mind. It's as if a switch just went in her head and she's changed drastically. It's funny how some of the episodes of Severance don't tonally suit the opening sequence, and just that white background with the title fading in can be enough. And this was a prime example of that. So I knew full well when that intro wasn't there like episode 1, it was going to be an immersive, intense episode that relied on drawing us in. I'd say that Patricia Arquette did a phenomenal job in this episode. As I mentioned, there was a lot of space in terms of dialogue in this episode, but when there was conversation, it was intense and then the pace would flip on a dime from being slow to extremely rapid, emotionally reminiscent, and I feel like her tone encapsulated all of what was necessary. Then, when there was no dialogue, her eyes and facial expressions mirrored that too, so it was arguably one of her strongest performances in the show. It was so strange seeing her kiss somebody, right? Surely that can't just be me. Harmony Cobel has always seemed like a character that's not necessarily devoid of emotion, but she's almost so devoid of emotion that it makes her overly emotional, but for all of the wrong reasons. So seeing her channel her youth and rekindle a flame with somebody that she clearly cared for when she was younger was a side to the character that we hadn't seen, and it just made her feel that little bit more human and relatable, as ordinarily she'd usually feel robotic and rigid, just like how we're seeing Miss Huang, which makes total sense as she's going through the exact same journey as what Harmony Cobel went through. On the flip side to that, I thought the contrasting performance of Jane Alexander as Celeste Sissy Cobel was one that I also thoroughly enjoyed watching. She was quite a haunting character with the look of disappointment that was constantly on her face and the upset that Harmony had tarnished the family name being something that plagued her. I thought her character served as a great example of how belief systems and religion can cause division within a family, especially when some believe, some don't, and some steer away from the very belief system that once kept them grounded. Harmony was genuinely acting how Sissy was up until a few episodes back, so it was interesting seeing that division that was now present and the friction that was there, when realistically it would have been like looking in a mirror for her when she was head of the severed floor, because all of those beliefs that she's let go of are within Sissy. I would say that it's been quite nice having these dedicated episodes that have provided clarity and allowed the discoveries to be made, but I'm definitely ready to be back on the severed floor and see just how all of those pieces are going to come together. We've still got the likes of the mystery with Bert and Irving that needs some more time investigating, and we've still got the entire story that's going on with Dylan and Gretchen, which I think has the potential to be an explosive one, because everybody still doesn't know that Innie Dylan has been meeting with his outie's wife and is pretty much falling in love with her. Plus, the way Mr. Milchick has been getting treated in the workplace and the overarching story of getting to the exports hallway and the testing floor to rescue Gemma are avenues that I just want to see being developed again. So I'm excited to see how all of these pieces are now going to join back together when the show returns next week for the penultimate episode. I'm guessing we're going to get some answers, as the pace is probably going to increase, seeing as though there's now only 2 episodes left. So, there you have it, Severance Season 2 Episode 8, Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode being broken down on Severance Season 2, then click on the card in the top corner, there's a playlist there. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for tuning into this week's breakdown of Severance, and I'll see you in the next one.